Let's see here. Hey, what's up, guys? John here. Say what's up in the chat. I'm going to walk you guys through something that's happening right now that is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So on this channel, I talk about obviously personal finance, real estate, business, and money. And one thing that I'm paying close attention to is, what's going on in terms of the real estate climate, the economy. I moved from Los Angeles. I'm in Florida now, and I'm watching this climate to see if we're going to see anything in Los Angeles or New York come to LA. And what we are now seeing is we're seeing new rental regulations, new proposals being put out to where owning real estate in Florida is going to be like owning real estate in New York City and owning it in Los Angeles. It's pretty crazy how fast things progressed. I called this a long time ago saying that I think it's a matter of time until we step into this situation. So I'm going to show you this. Let's see, here we go. I'm going to share this article with you. Let's see, I want to see if I can. Okay, so rent control measures are back as home rents reach new highs. Lawmakers across the U.S. are looking to enact rent control, reviving measures largely shunned in recent years in an effort to curb the surge in home rental prices throughout the country. The proposals would generally allow landlords to boost monthly rents by no more than 2% to 10%. Are on the legislative agenda in more than a dozen states. Rental prices are about 18%, 18% on average over the past 2 years, according to the real estate broker Redfin Corp. One thing that's very fascinating here is that they're discussing the rent regulation. However, used cars are up almost 50%. Gasoline is up 50%. Insurance, everything is up. Food prices are up. Yet no one's talking about regulating any of these corporations just yet. They're going first after the property owners of these assets. They're saying large cities like Boston, affluent suburbs in Montclair, New Jersey, lower income mobile home communities in Colorado, and fast growing metros in Florida are among the places now considering rent control. Rents are exploding at a pace far faster than incomes. An economist and professor at Columbia University School who researches rent control, the problem is now as bad as it has ever been and probably much worse. Rising rents are big contributors to the recent surge of inflation that is starting to weigh in on the U.S. economy. Cost of shelter accounts for 40% of the core consumer price index, CPI's biggest component. Economists at San Francisco Federal Reserve said this is where it's, let's see here, rent control measures in the U.S. date to the years following the First and Second World Wars. And the concept saw a major resurgence in the 1970s. And these are the markets that they're pursuing right now. So more recently, economists and politicians have reconsidered that thinking, pointing to rent control as one of the few ways to protect low-income renters who often face the greatest hardships. In 2019, AOC proposed a national rent control law. California and Oregon advanced rent control bills the same year. Now laws in both states. Affordability problems deepened during the pandemic. Home prices hit record highs in most parts of the country. Some cities are weighing more restrictive rent caps than previously considered. St. Paul, Minnesota, enacted last fall, dealing with rent control in the Midwest, and now has one of the most stringent policies in the country, while many rent control measures make exceptions for new buildings. Santa Ana, California, officials have gone beyond the state's rent control measure, which caps rents at 5% plus local inflation, to limit local rent increases to 3%. And now these are the markets that they're pursuing. In Florida, another state that preempts local rent control, lawmakers in Miami and Tampa. Miami and Tampa, they are talking about bringing in rent control. They're bringing in rent control in Miami and Tampa is their intention. So they said, but local rent controls were banned there nearly 3 decades ago in a statewide referendum. Massachusetts Democrats are advancing a bill that would repeal the state ban the Republican governor, Charlie Baker, has said he would probably not sign such a law. The real estate business successfully lobbied several states to write anti-rent control statutes decades ago, and the industry is active again. We consider it an existential threat. Building owners continue to argue that rent control will stunt the supply of new housing and ultimately make the rental market worse. Let me ask you a question. If you were building real estate and rent control came into your market, or rent became more optional, like California right now, because the eviction moratorium is pushed out until June of 2023, would you build property knowing that it's going to be regulated on how you can actually sell your units to the open market and when and if you can collect rent? That's the big question. We're seeing a big surge in markets like Tampa, in Texas, in Miami, in a lot of markets, mainly because people are running away from markets like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York City. So if this is happening, then what's ultimately going to happen is that we're stepping into a really big bubble that is about to burst if we start to see these rent regulations hit this open market. They say the real estate business successfully lobbied several states to write anti-rent control statutes decades ago. We consider it an existential threat. Let's see here. Some lawmakers, however, don't see a better way to address the rising rent burden. Florida, you renew your lease, and it says we will increase your lease by $500. Who can afford that? And Colorado State House Rep Andrew Bosnecker aims to cap mobile home lot rents by the greater of either 3% or local inflation rate in any year. Mr. Bosnecker, whose district includes part of Fort Collins, said rent control isn't enough to relieve the state's housing problems. There's also a supply shortage. He said, but significant increases in rent for mobile home lots necessitate a faster response. We've seen rent increases anywhere up to 50%. We have to do something to protect this affordable housing source. One thing with rent control, if you don't know what rent control is, I'm going to explain it simply. Rent control is a set of guidelines that is mandated by local governments. And what these guidelines will do is turn property owners into property managers. These property managers must operate their buildings to this new standard. So they may not be able to evict the tenant under certain protocols. They may not be able to increase rents. They may not be able to do a variety of things. Every single state and municipality has their own different rent control measures. However, what this does do in a very, very big fashion is that it takes housing units off of the market, mainly because if rents continue to increase, let's say like they've done last year at 18%, well, if they put in a 3% rent cap and you have a tenant that moved in, let's say at $1,000 now, and then next year it's $1,180, it increased 18%, why would they want to move if their rent's only going up 5%? So they're only going to spend an extra $50 and go from $1,000 to $1,050. If they move, they're going to have to go from $1,000 to $1,000 or $1,180, right? They're not going to do that. People aren't going to do that. So what are they going to do? They're going to stay in their units, and then ultimately the units that are not rent control, which are going to be newer construction in Los Angeles and in New York for the most part, they're going to be new construction. There's going to be more people looking for housing than there is available housing units. And then the rental rates on these new products, these new units, are through the roof. That's why you see brand new apartments for $4,000 or $5,000 in Los Angeles. It's not because, that's greedy developers trying to take advantage. It's because for these developers actually build new products, they have to do a variety of things. They have to get expensive permits. They have to circumvent the parking underneath the structure to meet new parking requirements for a lot of zoning. For example, in Los Angeles, you have LADWP, Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety, and they will mandate this. And so what happens is they have high cost to build these units. They have to throw in all the bells and whistles so that they can make a profit with building the units, right? They wouldn't have to do this if they just had a free open market. But now what we're seeing is a huge land grab by a lot of politicians with what's going on. They're blaming inflation on greedy landlords when in reality, the economy is in shambles because of everything that's happened. And they're pointing the finger back at us that we are the problem. This is the big problem that we're going to be stepping into, is because rent control will not solve the problem. That is a guarantee. And when it doesn't solve the problem, they're going to have a new solution to what will solve the problem. And ultimately, that new solution is going to continue to be an encroachment on property rights for landlords. That's why, for me, when I was saying to everyone, hey, I'm going to be moving to Florida, but I don't think what's happening in Los Angeles or what happened in LA and New York and other markets is going to stop. I think it's going to come to Florida. I think it's going to be coming to Texas and other markets. I think that big changes are going to be coming. It's not going to end here. And a lot of people said, oh, no, you're just, you're fear mongering or whatever. Here we are. So it's just obvious that this is what's going to happen. It's 100% obvious that this is what is going to happen, is that we are going to continue to see this encroachment. We're without question, we're already seeing it across our everyday lives in the economy and everything that's happening in terms of in the real estate market. But they're getting the media behind this and getting these protests active and ready to build out this public persona that the property owners and the landlords are the problem. So I wanted to bring this to everybody's attention so we can kind of have a discussion about this. But it is fascinating. Ron DeSantis is he's not really talking much about this. Lawmakers in Miami and Tampa, they're discussing declaring a housing emergency to pass rent control. Housing in Miami and Tampa, right? That's pretty insane to me. People say DeSantis won't let it happen. Look, I'm not so confident on that. I like to be a positive thinker, but I don't know if he has that much power. I think that we are going to start to see rent control measures. I think that it's going to kind of be a matter of time here. It's already changing the market, and Texas is locked in, dead market. I've been doing this since 2011. Wow. And long dragged out legal evictions on landlords. Maybe that could, one second. I think a lot of transfers of Florida are conservatives who better. Yeah, we're going to see what's happening here. Hold on one second. I'm going to answer a couple of these questions. Let's see. Hey, John, love your channel. Would you please talk in your opinion on investing in condos for vacation rentals in Florida this year next? Yeah, 1 second. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. So, would I talk about my opinion on investing in condos for vacation rentals? So this year and next. So, yeah, when you are investing in condos, one thing you have to be very, very aware of is the HOA and what you are allowed and not allowed to do inside of the HOA. So, for example, some HOAs will not allow you to rent your unit for 3 years. So it depends on the HOA. If you are going to operate your building or your unit as a vacation rental, one word of advice is just because comparable units right now are renting at high valuations, I would not buy a property, I would not buy a unit based on those numbers remaining true forever. You want to have flexibility. You really want to be able to pivot. I would underwrite that deal as looking at what the market rent is right now, reducing it by 20% so you have a margin in that deal and still giving yourself a little bit of flexibility, maybe even 25% to where you can, if you have to reduce rents by 25% and you still had, you're vacant 45 days a year, you're still making money. So it might be a little hard in Florida, but underwrite it effectively. I was listening to an article with Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb. And he was saying that he believes this high inflationary environment is going to push more people into Airbnb because people are going to need to make ends meet. They make ends meet, and what's going to happen? Supply and demand are going to dictate price, and then ultimately valuations could come down on these rentals if more people are competing for tenants. So I would just be conservative from that regard. I would just make sure that you are going to be able to make money in any different scenario. So yeah, that would be my answer to that. Let's see another question here. Thank you for doing all the research, making you for us. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You got it. Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about this? About the idea of rent control coming to Colorado, coming to Miami, coming to Tampa, coming to Minnesota, coming to, they said a dozen markets is what they're stating. They're saying that this is going to be coming to a dozen markets right here. Look, let's see. Yeah, a dozen states. So laws on how much landlords can raise prices are debated in more than a dozen states. That's significant. That is significant. That's what they're going to be pushing for. But you know who's going to be the big winner here? It's going to be the big corporations. Because if there is, right now, we already have a supply chain, or excuse me, we already have a supply issue with housing. We are, in desperate need for housing. So what's ultimately going to happen is if supply is constrained and people don't want to move because they simply just can't afford to move, what's ultimately going to happen? It's going to, and also it's getting more expensive to build. Lumber's more expensive, labor's more expensive. It's harder to get certain items because of the supply chain. What's ultimately going to happen is that the big private equity firms are going to be able to go out there and pounce on all these real estate deals. Meanwhile, mom and pop investors are getting crushed. So I'm gonna keep a close eye on what's happening in these dozen states, and I'll hop on a live stream when there's something more concrete. But this is crazy to me. This is absolutely insane to me to see Florida going in this direction. Yeah, some China's is closing. I saw that. I saw that. That also could feed the supply chain problems in a big way. So China's closing up pretty quickly. If you're reading the headlines, there, millions and millions and millions of people are closing up. So that could impact supply chains. We have a lot of uncertainty happening right now. And I think with all this uncertainty, there's going to be some very big questions answered very, very soon. Rent control include apartment buildings or only single family dwellings? That is a great, great question. So it depends on the location. So for example, in Los Angeles, if you have a single family home, they were trying to pass a bill that if you rented your single family home and the tenant, let's say you rented your house for, it was an investment property, a single family home. Let's say you have two homes. One's a primary residence, one is an investment property. You rent this investment property for $2,000 a month. And then next year, you don't want to rent it to that tenant anymore. Maybe you want your mother-in-law or somebody to move into it. Or maybe you just want to leave it vacant or increase the rent or whatever. They wanted rent control to stay intact so that you could only increase the rent what they were previously paying plus 3%. That was it. So regardless of how much your cost went up or down, they were trying to pass that. It did not pass. However, every city, every state, every municipality can push forward and pass their own rent control measures and real estate laws through rent control. And but generally for Los Angeles, it's buildings, I believe it's between 1980 or 1981 and before would all be considered rent control in LA. So any buildings before that, however, I believe they pushed it to 1994, 1995, maybe a year and a half ago. So they keep moving the goalpost. So soon it could just be all properties. It could be brand new construction. It could be a variety of, you never know where all this stuff is going to go. So, and it's kind of challenging to say how fast the things will ultimately unfold. We looked at how slow things have been progressing over the last couple of years. What we've seen is that it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And the same thing could very well happen to the real estate market, which is already at this point looking like it is happening. It's already happening, like death by 1,000 cuts. So it's hard to predict how fast it will happen, but things are not looking good, especially when we start to see places like Florida. A lot of people thought Florida was the anchor. And now they're talking about rent control in Miami and Tampa. So Wooden building supplies out of control. Yeah, I heard the HGTV show, Flip or Flop, canceled, and one of the main they canceled the show. The actual, the host of the show, they canceled it simply because they could not make numbers work on flips anymore because labor is too expensive, supply chain issues, materials are too expensive, and just so many moving parts. So like, you know what? And they pulled back on it. That was from an article I read, so I'm not 100% sure, but that's what it said. Most of the people out there don't know if it's, yeah, Wes. Yeah, let's see. That's exactly what need. They said that's exactly what needs to happen. People need to stop paying in mass. Well, so that's like an interesting position because someone on TikTok had the same stance on that. So let's say, for example, a lot of people stop paying rent, right? What would happen? This would ultimately allow big corporations, big private equity funds to run out there and acquire all this distressed property. Now, if we look at Facebook ads and online advertising, how much it's increased over the last 10 years, every year it just continues to skyrocket. What do you think would happen if these same types of entities owned all of or most of the distressed housing that would become available? Rents would likely skyrocket, right? Standards would change. So I think that that people need to protect the mom and pop investor. That's my belief. Mom and pop investor needs to be protected. The middle class needs to be protected, right? And so you want to definitely pay them. You want to take care of the middle class because the middle class, these people, they're getting hit just as hard. Most landlords, 76% of all property owners are mom and pop investors, right? They're mom and pop investors, and these investors are suffering rising costs through the roof like everybody else. So the only ones really benefit are these big private equity funds that are getting all of this capital. But let's see, I'm going to hop on here. Most people there also don't know what it. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to catch you guys later. I wanted to give you guys that update because I also, just seeing how fast this progressed. Someone asked me a couple of weeks ago, hey, John, do you think Florida is going to be the safe haven? And I said, no way. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen because what's happening in New York, what's happening in LA, what's happening in all these other markets is slowly but surely going to start heading south and east and north and west. It's going to be heading all over the place. So real estate investors out there, pay attention to what's happening in the market. Pay attention to what's happening in your city so that way you can make smart decisions ahead of time. All right, guys, I'll catch you later. Hit the plus sign or hit the sub button for future live streams. Hit the bell if you want to join it. And subscribe to me on TikTok. I post, a lot of stuff I won't post here, probably 4 to 5 times a day. I'm posted on TikTok. Same username, @this is John Williams. All right, guys.